Welcome back to Ramen is Racing, your one-stop shop for all things NASCAR, Ram, Dodge, Kaulig Racing, NASCAR gaming, and more. I'm Sean, and you know, I'm starting to have a bone to pick with this other guy, and I'll explain why in a second. But joining me for the first time in a while, he's back in studio and not stuck in a hot car like I am. It's Ryan. What's going on, man? Welcome back from vacation.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to rock my vacation hat. I was in Cape Cod this weekend. It was actually all week. Now you might be stuck in a hot car, but I was stuck in a hot cabin with no air conditioning for a week. So, of a man of my stature, that was uncomfortable, but I cannot complain. I was by the beach. I had a great week. Seems like I missed a lot, so we have a lot to touch on, and looking forward to diving into it.
Well, here's my bone to pick. Is last year, when all the Ram stuff was unofficially dropping, Ryan was where? On vacation. So as I'm sitting here, like, I was driving myself nuts. I'm like, oh, don't make me do one of these shows solo. Don't make me do one of these shows solo. And I do have plenty of experience in another project doing solo shows years ago, but like since then I had a heart attack and have had health issues, and I'd prefer to be on here with 2, 3, 4, 5 people if at all possible. And we're here though. We finally get to do this, and we figured instead of just tackling a few of the Dodge topics without breaking our word to people who we've promised we won't reveal certain information about, we are going to literally talk about every Dodge topic relating to NASCAR tonight, as well as Alex Bowman's retirement, Connor Zilisch basically all but sealed and delivered to Hendrick Motorsports, and some Trackhouse stuff from the past, which is very weird, and why that team, frankly, might be in a little bit of trouble here. Ryan, what have you made of before we dive into a specific topic, what have you made of all this from afar? Because I know your phone's been blowing up because, newsflash, I know there's some people that don't believe this, but Ryan and I both have access to that X account, the Ramen is Racing account. So when someone sends us a message or we get an update, we both get the notifications.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as you said, every time I go on vacations, things really get sideways, it seems like. But I definitely, listen, we've been talking about some of this stuff for a couple weeks, couple months at this point. So, we kind of were starting to put the, dot the I's, cross the T's on some of these topics. But I mean, it really this week, and it just really, I think, and we're going to get news sooner than later. One way or the the other, and we need answers. So I definitely thought that big Dutch league, and while there are still some things that need to be ironed out, I think multiple sources are starting to line up and things are coming into play that you did all the work, but I was following along, keeping up with it, and it was a lot. There was a lot that came in, a lot we discussed. So yeah, this week's been a whirlwind, and I definitely think there's big things coming for not just Kaulig, but for NASCAR as a whole. And obviously, we had some big bombshells across the sport this week. So, silly season is in full swing. We're over halfway through this regular season over halfway the regular season, halfway through the season. So, yeah, things are really getting interesting in the world of NASCAR. So, I've had a hard time with it, but man, this is the most fun. I love this part of the season, Sean. This is when the rubber meets the road. This is when all of the fun stuff really starts coming out. So yeah, big week, and there's a lot to digest.
We'll have to keep an eye on your connection. You were breaking out there for about 10 seconds, but I think mostly everybody got all of it. Yeah, so we got a lot to talk about tonight. We're not asking, if you want to send in a super chat and support the channel, we always encourage it because we have a lot of our own money invested in doing this. And it's not cheap to do everything that we do. So, but if you just want to send in a normal question in the comment section, we're going to take a few breaks tonight to get away from our main topics and answer some questions. I know we have some already submitted on X. I believe we have some submitted on Facebook, so I will do my best at accessing them. We are doing this without any sort of producer tonight. So let's start with this, okay? And I don't want to spend too much time on this topic, but Kaulig's Cup season in 2026 here. I won't say who because I didn't ask him for permission to reveal this conversation, but I was speaking with someone, I mentioned it to you who I was speaking to, pretty high up at Kaulig, and they felt that they are running better all around this year than they were last year, which is pretty impressive because last year they had at least a little OEM support and sim time and wind tunnel time and notes on the old body, and this year they have none of that. And I tend to agree. Obviously, AJ had a couple of DNS, which has basically all but ended any chance he had at the playoffs, barring some sort of miraculous run here. And he has had a very strong Indianapolis weekend so far, considering all those tools they do not have at their disposal. But I just wanted you to be able to grade the Kaulig season so far. Ty Dillon's kind of been Ty Dillon for the most part, but I got to give credit where it's due. And Ty Dillon over the last 3 weeks has been really good. 3 straight top 20 finishes, and it's shown some promise. The car's had a little bit of speed. I guess the unfortunate part for Ty is, unless the Dodge thing doesn't happen in 2027, I think not only may it be the end of the road for him here at Kaulig, but possibly in the Cup Series as well.
Listen, I agree. I wish I had the stats to compare top 10s, top 20s, average point position, total points from this year to last year. But it feels like they are more competitive this year consistently. I think last year they had some really high highs, right? They were in contention to win the Coke 600, finished 4th. They had some really good 1.5 mile runs where they were running top 10. This year, I don't think they've quite had that raw speed to be competitive to that stance, but more consistently, week in and week out, they've been better. AJ in particular, we'll start with AJ. Obviously a 37th place finish 2 weeks ago, 38th last week, really hurts, right? We were 19th in points. I think we've fallen to 22nd, maybe 23rd, and deeply out of contention. But when you look at the aggregate of their performance on the 2 mile tracks, the short tracks, the 1.5 mile tracks, they've been steady, top 20, fighting for top 15s most weeks. They've been qualifying well. Listen, we talked about that ad nauseum last year. They would have a good practice, qualify poorly, and then kind of over the course of the race, work their way up to a respectable finishing position. This year, I feel like they've unloaded okay, qualified okay, and most weeks held position or even gained. And that is, I think, a really big deal for an organization that doesn't have notes, doesn't have financial support, doesn't have the wind tunnel. And don't forget, Chevy has a new body this year. That's a big deal. Like, they couldn't, while the notes, help, the setups do change. And we've seen the Chevy team struggle a bit this year with the new body. They've added more horsepower.
They're not even getting a Post-it note on the body.
Right, exactly. So the fact that it's not like they just rolled over last year's notes to this year, the car body changed, the horsepower at a lot of these tracks changed, and even the downforce changed at most of these tracks this year. So yes, I do think they've had a much better year in general, and I still think they have a very strong shot at finishing top 20 in points, and I believe they finished 22nd or 23rd in points last year. So even matching that, which is where they are now, to being potentially better is an incredible feat. And for Ty, I agree. His last few weeks have been good. And I saw, during the rain delay a few weekends ago, he said, yeah, we've been running much better for the last couple months since like the All-Star race. And I tend to agree that their performance, whilst not to the standards of the 16 team, have been better. And the downside is they buried themselves so deep early in the season, they're not going to be able to dig out of it. And I don't think we're going to see a super respectable points finish. Maybe top 30 would be a good year for them. But if, again, they've shown much improved pace. And I give the Andrew Dickinson credit for the setups and Ty for running them. So I would give this year, honestly, a strong B for the team as a whole. I mean, I think we were both worried they'd be running 30th every week, and they have far exceeded that.
I mean, it wasn't just us. Jordan Bianchi and Bob Pockras have both come out and said they expected them to be running 30th every week. And while Ty has been down there for a chunk of the season, AJ's been nowhere close to that, right? So up until 3 weeks ago, AJ was sitting 16 points out of a playoff spot. So now he's like 90, but impressive practice numbers, really good lap averages. I think P5 on the 10-lap average, 5-lap average. I can't remember what one it is. But then qualified ninth too. One spot ahead of Kyle Larson. And the reason why I wanted to start with how they're doing, right, is one of the things that we hear a lot on social media is, and yes, I apologize, you're going to see me sweating. I'm in a car and it's mosquito central out, so rolling down the window is not an option. And I don't want the AC to ruin the stream, but my kids are inside trying to get to bed and they're causing havoc, and I didn't want the background noise, so I get to deal with sweaty old me tonight. But look, one of the common things that you and I see on social media all the time, and it's not necessarily from at-track reporters or even other content, well, a little bit of other content creators, but a lot of it's just people on X. And it's, oh, well, Kaulig can't do this and Kaulig can't do that. And as I talked about on my last stream, Ryan and I have every reason to not be overly fond of Kaulig, given the way their social media team handled dealings with us at the beginning of the year. And I think you got to give credit where credit is due. That team, I can not like the social media side of that team all I want, but the team, the Mike Cooks, Trent Owens, Andrew Dickinson, Jaron Antley, AJ Allmendinger, Chris Rice, Ty Norris, Matt Kaulig, Ty Dillon, all those guys, and everybody else behind the scenes has been able to come together. And when's the last time you could say, and obviously he's fallen down a bit the last couple of weeks, but you had a driver in the top 20 NASCAR Cup Series point standings with no OEM support, no sim time, I believe next to no wind tunnel time, no notes on the new body, not so much as a post-it note for help, no engineering help from ECR. I know a lot of people are like, oh, they still run ECR engines to get ECR engineering support. No, they don't. They get the engine from ECR, and then it's Kaulig engineers that work on that engine now, not ECR people. When's the last time you could say a driver was in the top 20 points in the Cup Series without all those tools in the era where there is still sim to help you? And I think it's an easy answer. We have never seen it. So when people go, oh, they're going to be terrible with Dodge next year, I certainly don't expect them to light the world on fire if Dodge is coming in. But like, as I made a post about this week, I believe Mike Cook actually liked it. It's like, look at what they're doing without sim, without really any real engineering support outside of their new engineers that they've hired, without any sort of wind tunnel time testing, without no OEM support, no new info being passed along their way on a new body, which is exactly what they would go through next year, except for the OEM can help them. I honestly, and when you consider the fact this isn't 2001, this isn't Everham Motorsports or Petty Enterprises or Bill Davis Racing or Ganassi, all the chassis and underneath are the same. They're not different. The engine is different and the body is different. Those are two massive things. I'm not downplaying it. But the idea that people think Allmendinger and whomever, we'll discuss that a little later in the show, are going to go out there and be glued to 32nd to 33rd every race, I do not think that's the case unless the engine comes out a complete mess.
Yeah, I mean, listen, in this era, Gen 7 for sure, and even honestly going back to the previous generation of car, the sport has evolved to a point where if you're not part of a major organization or affiliated with a major organization, you got nothing. And we've seen the consolidation of the sport. It's basically the four big teams and the four big teams satellites, and that's how it operates. Back in the day, even using 2001 is a good example. You used to have independent teams, one-offs. The name that immediately jumps in my head, I'm sure there's probably a newer, more recent reference than this, but the one that immediately pops in my head was Ricky Rudd, right? His ran for himself, his own team, his own equipment. That's kind of how I feel like this Kaulig team is racing this year. They are completely on their own. They're doing it their way. They're doing it grassroots style, and they're just producing. And listen, you do bring up a very good point that the reason I think they are at least competitive is because of the spec aspect of the series. And while some people don't particularly like that, I think it has benefited them in this instance. And while the big teams have mastered and separated, it's still, everybody's still, even first through 30th. I mean, even Cody Ware was running pretty good last week. He was running top 20 in Atlanta. We're talking 3/10, 4/10 separates the entire field. So, as you said, unless they completely miss the boat on an engine, which I don't think they will, because NASCAR has very strict standards on the bandwidth and performance range and all of those things. I think the engine will be close enough.
Boy, do we have a lot of engine talk for you guys tonight.
Yeah, it's big, and it's a big part of it, no doubt. And again, I don't want to downplay the engine. The engine is incredibly critical to the whole operation. But my concern, and we're seeing it in the trucks this year, and I'm sure we'll touch on this as well. It's the aerodynamics of the chassis is where I'm most concerned, because we know the Ram trucks are by a substantial margin the slowest, the worst aerodynamically in the sport. If the new car can come in and be close within, whatever tolerance you want to use as a reference, I see no reason that they can't come out and maybe not quite replicate this year's results, but be somewhere in the middle. I do not expect them to be bringing up the rear every week. So as long as they can, and I know they're doing wind tunnel time, like we know for a fact at this point that they are wind tunneling the new chassis.
The new body, but
the new body. Sorry, the new body.
Yeah. There are people trying to downplay that, but no, it's happening. Look, also reminder: if you have any questions and/or comments, opinions, whatever on anything NASCAR related, but specifically the Dodge stuff, please fire them away. And when we take our pit stop Q&A break, we will take a look at our various social media accounts and answer whatever we possibly can. What do you say we get into this, though, man? We got a lot of notes to go over and a lot of things that, a few that I've discussed on here, but you haven't had the chance to share your opinion on a lot of it. And let's see what we can break down. As I had the subtitle of this stream listed as, let's sort out what's fact, what's fiction, and what's rumor for now. And just to go over this, I know I went over it at the beginning of the stream 3 or 4 days ago. A rumor does not mean it's not true. To the credit of the people we get information from, we just don't say anything's fact unless we can get it from more than one place. If it's only coming from one place, that does not mean that person's wrong. But for our own sake, we'll list it as rumor. And this week, for the first time, I would argue ever doing this, we had, I don't know if I'd call it conflicting information, but different information coming in on the same topics from people who are more often than not right, which has left us in a bit of a puzzled state. So we're going to use this stream to go over what we're allowed to go over. And let's dive into it, man. I might disappear from Cam here as I pull up the notes. All right, can you still hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, so we're doing this in order. We were told very early on last summer, like just after the Ram thing was announced, that Stellantis would be super aggressive and try to make the 2027 season, but 2028 might be more realistic. And then everything went quiet for a while, and I mean a long while. There was lots of Ram stuff coming out. We had the Casey Kane thing and the Elliott Sadler and Ryan Newman thing. The Tony Stewart thing. Casey Kane has not panned out yet, but I suppose there's still time. I don't know if that one's going to pan out or not. But it was really, really early on, like last year, that we were told this. And I've just seen a lot of people out there going, well, how are they doing it this quickly if they only started in February or March of this year or whatever? No, this has been going on for basically a calendar year now. And if they do make 2027, it will have gone on for about a year and a half before the season actually begins next season, that is. And that's about how long it was for Everham. And I'd argue that Everham had more to do in that time. And then the Bianchi report happened about the body, which is a Dodge Charger body. The last thing we were told, I know I don't have it here in my notes, but was that it resembles the two-door something 6. I don't have it right in front of me. Hurricane body. We attached a picture of it in one of our X posts in the last week. It's an orange one. You can find it. And then Bianchi reported that they'd had a breakthrough with the engines, and his exact wording was, sources around the industry tell him that Dodge, Stellantis, the whole group over there, Tim Kuniskis and company, have become increasingly confident with this breakthrough that they will likely be ready by the 2027 season. What were your thoughts when you read that, man? Because up until that point, even stuff that we get behind the scenes, it was more quiet than it's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, listen, from the moment Kaulig and Ram, made their announcement that they were partnering up, and I know people have to be very careful, keep expectations in check. But my expectation from day one was that a Dodge would be on track in the Cup Series for 2027. I haven't particularly wavered from that opinion. We haven't spoken on it a lot. As you said, it did go quiet. And listen, they had to do the work. You make these big announcements. Hey, we're coming back into the sport. There's all of this hoopla. They had a Ram, so we saw the promo videos of that and all this buildup. But then they had to go to work. So they had to develop the body. They had to start working on the engine. They had to start putting, the resources, engineering support, and even just building the infrastructure to get through this whole the wind tunnel, the the simulators, like all of these things. There's a laundry list of stuff that they had to accomplish. And obviously we weren't going to get a blow-by-blow report of their every step along the way. But just knowing how Tim Kuniskis spoke about this, even at the announcement for the Ram trucks last year, I felt in my heart that they were going to be on track in Cup in 2027. Obviously, they were going to have the fallback for 2028, but I never felt that they weren't going to make it. And we still don't know. Like we have to be careful even today, right now, saying that we don't know if they'll be on track next year. But it feels like they will. The wind is definitely blowing that direction. So, hearing the reports from Bianchi and Pacras and all of the media people that have commented on this that we've spoken to have just kind of solidified that they are doing everything in their power to make this happen. And it feels at this point like it will. So I guess I'm not shocked. I am just encouraged that we are hearing the information as it's starting to become more solidified that we are going to be there. If we were, I recognize this is the last week of July, but if we were mid-August and we hadn't heard anything, then I would say there's no chance. But now that we've had the last 2 weeks of information kind of start spilling out, yeah, I think this is I'm not going to say it's done, but I feel like this is close to a confirmation as we can possibly get that we will be on track in a Dodge come 2027 Daytona 500.
Had to make sure I wasn't muted. So over the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've been told that they as in Stellantis, Dodge, Kaulig. Yes, I know this is really hard for some people to believe, but Kaulig Racing is going to be the factory team. I know there's people that are scoffing at it, being like, "Oh, it would never be Kaulig." Still, and I get it. You look at the Ram performance and go, "There's no way it can be Kaulig." It's Kaulig, people. We were told they were hoping to have things approved by the time they reach Daytona. I think we're about 4-ish weeks away from that. Maybe less now. I think it's about 4 weeks though. So they can announce there. That's exactly where they announced the truck stuff. Now they did do it at Daniel Dye's father's dealership. I don't know if that would be in the cards again or not, but that's what we've been told. But it was stressed to us. Even that might be too fast. And then you got to start looking at like some big time tracks in the chase that they'd consider doing an announcement at. And I think the ones that stand out to me is Bristol in the chase? I can't remember if it is or not.
I don't remember. I don't think it is.
I know Darlington is, so that would be a distinct possibility. There's no Michigan, so that's out. But yeah, they were hoping for Daytona, but even that might be too fast. I know there was a fairly reputable podcast out there speculating this week that the unannounced press conference this weekend at Indy would be them, but it was only a 15-minute time slot. Look, these guys aren't doing this announcement in 15 minutes. That is not the way Stellantis operates. They're going to make a big deal about this. The car will be there for everybody to see. You'll have representatives from Dodge there. You'll have all the Kaulig representatives there. It's not something that's going to be over in 15 minutes. You're probably looking at a 1-hour deal. They will make a big deal about this. It will not be 15 minutes and done. Jordan Bianchi and Dale Jr., the guys over at NWP, that's Danny B. Talks, Eric Estep, and Iceberg, Jarrett, as well as a couple of NASCAR reporters who we can't name, all say it's more likely that it happens, meaning Dodge in 2027, than it doesn't. And the NWP guys made mention of deadlines already being pushed and extended. And I looked into this a bit a couple weeks ago. And yeah, at the beginning of the year, Bob Pockrass released all the information on what it takes for a new OEM to have the body submitted by, to have the engine submitted by, and not only are those deadlines past, those deadlines are way past. Like, we are way past the normal deadline time. So NASCAR is definitely really helping this thing along. And then on July the 2nd, earlier this month, Chris Rice told the TMD guys that there was an absolute cutoff date where this thing's either going to happen or not going to happen for 2027. He probably should have said there's an extended cutoff date because they're way past the one in the rules and regulations. But that he would keep that date to himself, and that date wasn't close yet. And he said that July 2nd. So you can interpret what isn't close. I know there's been speculation about August 1st, but I get the feeling August 1st is not the date, and the date is even further. I think NASCAR, Chris Rice also made a point of saying NASCAR has really been helping them along in this entire process. Whenever they need NASCAR to come and look at the stuff, NASCAR comes and looks at the stuff. And it was Ty Norris who revealed on Butterbean's podcast this week that it was NASCAR that put Kaulig in touch with Stellantis to begin with, not people inside of Kaulig. Ryan, your take on all of that, man. Break it down.
Yeah, so to confirm kind of what you said a few minutes ago, the Coke 400 is on August 29th, it looks like. So we're actually over a month from now, just over a month. So when we're talking deadlines, you already said it, I don't need to rehash it. The deadlines for this legally in the rule book, I mean, we're talking like March, guys. Like at the very beginning of this season were the deadlines written in the book. So we have more than blown by those. To me, I think, again, we don't know. He didn't say. September 1st makes more sense to me, right? That would be, again, if they were to make an announcement at Daytona, that'd be the weekend of the August 20th, 29th. My guess is they have until September 1st to put this together. Maybe it's a little bit later than that, but I would assume that's probably from July 2nd. That makes the most sense to me. But yeah, I think what it boils down to is, that NASCAR has wanted this fourth manufacturer in the Cup Series since Dodge left in 2012. So, and they've been talking about this for at least half a decade, fourth manufacturer. So they have definitely wanted this. They're pushing for it. They're going to do everything they can to get it done. And listen, I do want to acknowledge that I don't think this gets done even with the extended deadline, unless the other teams and the other manufacturers signed off on it. So I think, that's kind of a background bit, but I definitely want to acknowledge that, I think there's been a collaboration across the sport to help make this happen. So that's where I stand on this. And I do think Kaulig is in a good position. They, as you mentioned, and we've had these conversations, the NASCAR and Kaulig have some sort of, they built a good relationship, and they are making everything they can available to Kaulig to get this done. So, and again, we've talked about this. If this was one person or one reporter or one YouTube channel, I would have my doubts. But at this point, there's so much smoke to this fire with multiple big names, with multiple big YouTube channels saying the same thing, that we're this is going to, unless something falls apart, which it could, we will touch on this in a little bit. There was already a setback that they're having to work through.
Pretty massive one.
Yeah,
this is a very massive one.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about the other manufacturers. Like, I don't know if people understand just how much they might be involved in this, or at least one of them anyway. All right, let's, as I put up on the chat there, continue to get your questions in. We do see the people that have submitted questions. We will get to them. We are going to take a break shortly here from our topics, and just bear with us a little while longer. How do I... Oh, that's because it's a comment that I left on there, not a comment I posted on this thing. I'm going to figure out how to take that down. Give me 1 second here, guys. It's been a while since I've had to do this. There we go. All right, let's go back to these notes. Where were we? The Chris Rice July 2nd one, right? Okay. On July 16th, Chris Rice, for those that don't know, that's the Kaulig Racing CEO, didn't outright deny wind tunnel rumors. rumors. I know the TMD guy, specifically Mike Bagley, tried to say he did. I have listened to the interview 3 times. I will do that. I will go back and re-listen to interviews to match up with what we're being told behind the scenes. And sometimes, I'll give Chris credit. He has improved his media game because it's become harder to read in between the lines of what he's saying. But make no mistake, he does not deny in that interview the wind tunnel rumors. He says there's nothing to announce now, but he hopes there's some really cool things to talk about in the near future. Here's where things start to get interesting. We received a report from one of our sources that they might be working on a modified version of the old R6 P8 Dodge engine. That was the last Dodge engine coming in to NASCAR as they were exiting. And funny enough, Parker Kligerman either seen our post or our live stream or something, because he took the time to talk about what we posted. And he said that he used to test that engine and that engine was designed to cool the car better. He and, oh man, ex-Kaulig driver, why can I not remember his name? Landon Castle. Both kind of said, well, yeah, the engine's like 13 years old, but why can't they use it? What has changed? And they acknowledge some stuff has changed, but a lot of stuff is very much still the same. Chris Rice was asked about the R6 P8 on TMD this week, and he completely avoided the question. Moved on to something else. I can't remember if I have this further in my notes, but he did say when there's something to update, they will update it, and that there's still a tall hurdle to overcome. He was not in a very good mood. I'll give him that. You could tell visually Chris was not in a good mood, and usually he presents himself as the happy-go-lucky guy. Said he's not getting much sleep. I have no doubt that there's still a hurdle or two to overcome here, but that they're near the finish line. But make no mistake, if they can't overcome the hurdle, there is only so far NASCAR is going to be able to push this until they go, all right, guys, it's time to close up shop and it's 2028. I also think Chris might be hamming this up a bit because if you go back a year ago, we submitted questions to TMD as well as one of our Patreon members, and they asked Chris the questions back then about Kaulig Racing and Ram, and Chris got legitimately pissed off on the show and basically said it wasn't happening in not so many words. No, sorry, he flat out said it's not us. He would like it for it to be us, but it's not us. And then Mike Bagley came out and said it wasn't them. And then literally the same day, we got a message from one of our sources, and all I will say is he has very close connections with Kaulig. And they said, no, it's them. And then sure enough, stuff started to trickle out. I think it was Mopar insiders that came out and were like, no, we've heard it's them. And sure enough, it ended up being them. So again, Chris dodged the questions about the RP68. Parker Kligerman and Landon Castle talked about it. And they said, well, there's some stuff you would absolutely have to change. There's not as much that have changed on those engines as people like to make out. Here's a big one. The Closing Laps podcast that features Breakhard, a popular NASCAR YouTuber who is very much more often right than not, said he heard it would be a rebranded engine that is white labeled. Now that means someone takes their stock engine, basically scrubs off the OEM and relabels it for another team. Now, the catch is when we checked into the rules, like we don't think Dodge can go out there and run a Toyota block, a Ford block, or Chevy block. Because right now, if you look in the rule book, that is against the rules. However, if they're just taking that base RP68 block and then using tech from someone else's engine to get it done, and then white labeling them, that could be how it gets done. What does this mean? Well, it means that they would have somebody else, at least in the short term, meaning the first year or two, build their engines for them when they figure out what the long-term plan is for their team. There were rumors about a team / engine builder that we cannot name building their engines for them. And it would be done through like a third-party company, but we were told that deal fell through. We also believe that deal was much earlier in the year, towards the beginning of the season. And we also believe this is not the engine breakthrough Jordan Bianchi was referring to in his report. We were told by someone who should be in position to know that the long-term plan for Dodge would be to run their engine program similar to TRD, but they might have to do something else for the first couple of years. Now, Ryan, we can't talk about who that engine builder might be, but it might not be hard for people to connect the dots. And that's not going to happen. And I'm kind of thankful for that. I told you, I know there's a lot to break down there, but I told you that I'd almost rather wait till 2028 than to go that route.
Yeah, we had a pretty lengthy conversation about this last night, and we were both in kind of agreement. And again, this is some of the conflicting reports we were getting. This was the first we heard of it, and we're like, ooh, this is not a direction I'm comfortable in. I doubt it's a direction the team's comfortable in. But business is business, and to meet deadlines, sometimes you got to make deals with the devil. And that's where we thought this was going. It seems like that's not the case, which I am thankful for. But it does limit options, right? So, all right. So I'm going to start with the R6 P8 rumor. At the end of the day, it's a block. And you so clearly stated that one of the core rules of NASCAR is, if, as a manufacturer, you have to, at a minimum, present your own block. Now, what you do with it after that, I think there's a lot more leniency to make things happen. But it certainly seems like, as a foundation, and this is something you and I touched on last year, before this all, before the Ram deal came about, they were building this engine back in 2012. And one of the core reasons Dodge ended up getting out of the sport at that point wasn't because of their engine development per se. They wanted to continue doing it, but they outsourced their engine to Penske. And when Penske made the decision to switch to Ford, all of a sudden, Dodge was without an engine. And while the R6 P8 is a Dodge block and it is their property, they had nobody to build them, right? They were very reliant on Penske. So
really quickly before you continue, I don't know if you got that nerdy video I sent you. If people really want to learn about the R6 P8, all you need to type in is Dodge NASCAR P68 engine on YouTube, and you can watch this thing in active development as recently as a few years ago, and people getting their hands on some of them. And there's some really nerdy shit in there, but also some really cool features that some of the other manufacturers didn't have back then.
Yeah, exactly. And I am curious about the cooling, because Parker touched on that. I'm not sure how this block would have improved or not. And again, this is 2012 we're talking about. So fast forward 15 years, maybe that technology is no longer, it might not have the same effect, or if it does, it's the other teams have caught up, right? But nonetheless, the point is they do have a foundational starting point. They need somebody to build it. And while I do believe their long-term goal is to go down the route of TRD, make the engine department, whether it's a Hemi or a Ram, or they're doing it out of Dearborn, Michigan, whatever. I do think 3 years from now, Dodge will be producing their own engines in-house. But to make the 2027 deadline, they're not there. They're not going to get there. So
I would be blown away. Like, I do believe it's one of those things where two things can be true, right? Like, they can become the TRD route, which for Dodge and Stellantis, I mean, unless Kaulig becomes a powerhouse overnight, which I won't rule out. You never know how all this is going to turn out. Like, you want to protect yourself from having that Penske thing happen again.
Yeah.
And by handling your own engine long term, you protect yourself from ever having that happen again.
Yeah, exactly. So I firmly believe Kaulig will have a major play in that down the road, but it will be ran and operated by Dodge. I am confident in that, but not in 2027. So this is the part where we have to watch ourselves here. But I guess for all of the people that are watching this, you're
Don't
NASCAR
speculate.
smart. Yeah, you guys are NASCAR smart, but there are only a certain number of engine manufacturers in NASCAR. You can do the math.
In the Cup Series.
There's 4 engine manufacturers. Hendrick, right? Chevy, ECR, TRD, Roush Yates. That's it. 4. So when you think about who has the capability of building an engine that Dodge can use, you're pulling from a very small pool. So you can kind of start doing the math of, well, TRD is TRD. They're their own math. They're their own thing. Nobody's getting TRD. So the options are becoming limited. So think of it from that perspective, that the likelihood is somebody or somebodies within that scope will be building these engines for Dodge and white labeling, as people have commented in the chat. So how the final product rolls out, how the agreements come into place, who they end up going with, and how it works, those are things that will be determined down the road, sooner than later, hopefully, so they could be on the track in 2027. But they will have to make some level of an arrangement with an existing engine manufacturer to get this thing on track. So what that looks like is to be determined, but I think we'll touch on this a little bit more. We think we have an idea where it's going to go, but we'll have to start putting the pieces together.
Yeah, we have a Q&A break. I know we have a lot of questions in the chat that we're going to get to. We'll focus on YouTube questions for now, and then we'll check X and Facebook on our second Q&A break. But I will say this, right after the Q&A break, we're going to talk about a rumor about Kaulig Racing possibly moving, meaning their location. And you can read into that what you will. And we will recklessly speculate a bit, because the next thing we talk about, well, the Kaulig Racing rumor about moving seems legit, and we'll explain how. The second part to that, which connects to what we've just been talking about, is speculation on our behalf and not something that we've heard concrete. I should also point out, before we just say that it's 4, there are outside parties that can manufacture this engine too. Engineering companies, and even say an engine manufacturer down in the O'Reilly series. They could step up and decide to do it. And that was told to us by a reporter. They didn't say that's what's happening, but they said don't rule that out if they're just looking for a year or 2 fix until they get their TRD-like operation off the ground again. Until someone tells us otherwise, we believe that it has to be the Dodge block. I have a really hard time believing NASCAR would stretch the rules so far that you would see a Toyota, Chevy, or Ford full-on engine in that Dodge. I don't think that's happening. Now, are there going to be components from those other manufacturers that are part of the overall engine? Almost guaranteed the first couple of years. But the block itself, as the rules state, has to be specific from that manufacturer. And unless they designed a new block super fucking quick, I mean, it is 2026. I won't rule anything out. The safe bet is that is the R6P8 block that Chris Rice refused to answer the question about this week.
Yeah, and I do want to jump on just quickly on that. The small block engine, the 300 and I think it's 58 cubic inch small block, which is what NASCAR uses, has been around for 30 plus years. The technology of what a 358 small block hasn't changed. The stuff that has changed, the electronic fuel injection, right? They would have to figure out how to implement that, because I guarantee you that engine in 2012 had carb. The ECU aspect, right? Those are the things they would have to figure out, and maybe they'd have to pull from other sources and maybe Frankenstein it a bit to make it work. But the core engine, the core block, when you're talking pistons, camshaft, crank, right? Like all of that technology is the same as it was 20 years ago. So they have a foundation without a doubt.
And I want to give credit again. I know I said this on the last stream I did solo. Matt Weaver was the first one to come out publicly about that. It was last year. And he said, look, Dodge has a block. And for the most part, that block works. So in terms of the new vehicles, obviously they can't just take the R6P8, stick it in the Cup car now, and away they go. There has been too much that has changed, but there are people making it sound like, oh, this thing's 13 years old, so it's outdated. Guys, there are engines in other manufacturers right now in Cup that have components that are just as old, if not older in some states. So the engine development process in NASCAR hasn't developed as much as people think. And one of the things Parker Kligerman and Landon Castle talked about is like, okay, well, was it EFI back then, which is electronic fuel injection? It was. So like, there's a lot more similar to like what was going to be their 2013 engine than people think. All right, let's get to some questions. The chat's active. Love to hear what you guys and gals have to say. Our plan was to go an hour and a half tonight. We might end up going an hour and 45. We'll see. I do want to get through all these topics. Also, if you haven't yet, we are in the process of relaunching our Patreon. As of today, I finally got the link changed on it. It was Kaulig Nation, which is what we used to be for the longest time. Don't worry, we're not rebranding. If Dodge comes in next year, it's not going to be Dodging is Racing. We are Ramming is Racing. That's our name. This is our brand. We're not going anywhere. But if you want to support the show on another level and get bonus content, which will start up again here shortly, it's patreon.com/Ramming is Racing. And follow us on X at Ramming is Racing. Really simple and easy to do. Let's get through some of these questions, man. I'm going to get rid of the border during this so I can read it a little easier. All right. This is really small and hard to read on my phone, but I'm working at it.
You want me to read it? I can read it pretty clearly.
Sure.
All right.
As long as you don't break out.
All right. The first question was, I think that you have a more chance of being struck by lightning on a beautiful sunny day than SVG ever has driving anything except for a Chevy in NASCAR. Not really a question, but let's put it this way. I remember a conversation last year, Sean, when he came over originally from the supercars, that he raced Fords, right? And everybody then was like, he'll only race Fords. Trackhouse will switch to Fords. Obviously, that hasn't happened. He's become a Chevy driver. The bigger question I have, I don't disagree. I think SVG could very well be a Chevy driver for his whole career. The question is, will he stay at Trackhouse? Because, remember, not only is Connor Zilich's contract up, so is SVG's, and honestly, so is Ross Chastain's. If SVG is hired by a different team, at the end of the day, SVG will drive whatever manufacturer team hires him. If Penske hires him, he'll drive a Ford. If Joe Gibbs Racing hires him, he will drive a Toyota. He does not have a say in what his manufacturer is outside of deciding who he signs with. The driver doesn't have that much pull in NASCAR. He very easily could stay at Trackhouse his whole career and race Chevys his whole career. But he will race for whatever team he races for and whatever manufacturer that team has support from.
Yeah, this is a topic that is scheduled a little later in our show that we are going to talk about. It's important to remember this. If you were contracted to a manufacturer and that manufacturer really doesn't want to lose that driver, that manufacturer will do whatever they can to pull whatever strings they have to get that driver to move to a different team, like what's happening with one prominent prospect coming 2028, according to basically everybody at the Athletic. And it's not it. Look, Trackhouse is in tough here. If you're a Trackhouse fan, there's not a lot of good news for you on the show, and maybe not news, maybe someone's seen the writing on the wall and talked about it this week on a different show, and we'll talk about that. Hey, Tori, how's it going? What's that one say, Ryan?
If Dodge does return to Cup next year, could we possibly see 3 Kaulig Dodges at Daytona, one of them being an open car?
I would say that's a 95% chance of happening. Money talks and bullshit walks. And I would not be surprised if that open car has the number 14 on it. Read into that what you will.
Yeah. If Kaulig and Dodge make their appearance in 2027, I would be beyond shocked if they didn't bring 3 cars to Daytona.
One with the number 14. That's where and possibly double duty for the driver of that particular number that weekend. We'll see though. Like I said, money talks. We'll see.
So this kind of touches on what we were just mentioning. Is Connor Zilisch a Chevy driver or a Trackhouse driver contract?
Well, if everybody remembers when Connor Zilisch signed with Junior Motorsports, he got placed in a Chevy. He had already had a contract with Chevy before he signed with Junior Motorsports or Trackhouse. Again, we're going to touch on this topic a little bit later, but I will answer it this way. If you're a Trackhouse fan and you want Connor Zilisch to stay, that probably has like less than a 1% chance at happening at this point. And I know that seems extreme, but
yeah, I do want to add just one nugget to this. There's a reason Alex Bowman signed a 1-year deal. Connor Zilisch has 1 more year contracted to Trackhouse. For him to switch to Hendrick a year early, they would have had to have bought out a Trackhouse contract to make that happen.
Which would not be cheap because they don't just buy out the contract, they pay whatever number that Trackhouse feels like they're owed to do it. Hey, this is what happens when you're. Let's count. Trackhouse isn't in front of Hendrick. Trackhouse is definitely no longer in front of Spire. Is Trackhouse in front of RCR? I mean, RCR has an engine program, but typically Trackhouse runs better. But in terms of what is the natural pecking order, probably not.
Well, so now RCR is in the doghouse. Remember that. So when I guess,
multiple.
So when you look at I would say Trackhouse is ahead of RCR, and let's just leave it at that for now. I don't know how much we can get into that, but let's just say RCR is in the doghouse with Chevy. So I would say Trackhouse is number 3.
Speaking of which, Mark asks, I have a way to access a bigger font now. So do you think RCR is going to build the engine for Dodge? And then he adds in, behind closed doors. We will give you, we'll see how well our timing is here and how much we're off, a 1-word answer with no context whatsoever because we're not allowed on the count of 3. So on 3, Ryan.
Oh, God.
1, 2, 3. No.
Maybe.
Maybe. Ryan's going maybe. I'm going no. Yeah, I'm going no. So you can begin to start to dot the I's and connect the T's. Yeah. I wish we had permission to talk more in that area of things, but we don't as of yet.
Yeah.
What's this? I feel like other manufacturers want Dodge to come back too. Well, they signed a contract in the new agreement that said they will do whatever they can to bring new manufacturers into the sport. So, considering that contract is also preventing new charters from being released, you can bet NASCAR wants them helping the new manufacturers into the sport as well.
Yeah. I would say this Dodge, and I don't know if this was specifically a Dodge deal, but they are doing a solid for all the other teams by not introducing the 4 new charters. By keeping the charters at 36, that keeps more money in everyone's pockets, benefits the other manufacturers. I think that helped loosen a little bit of the gum that was sticking things around. So I do think the other manufacturers are helping in whatever way they can. I'm not saying they're throwing notes at them, but they are certainly not blocking some of these dates, right? I think they could have, other manufacturers could have thrown much bigger hissy fits that they are getting extended deadlines. And by not fighting that, that's how they're really helping them get this done. Are you muted, Sean?
Yes, I am. My apologies. Thanks for letting me know that. Did I hear right that Mini Tyrell will be out unless Kaulig decides to keep him in the 14 after this year? You almost heard right. What Chris Rice said was basically unless Ram decides to keep him in the car. Let me just be fair or not, black and white with this as it gets. Mini Tyrell is out after this year. He might be able to go win that seat back. It might be uneventful in terms of the people on the show, but it's really unfair to him, really, because like this year was about just making it to the track. They still have not raced their first new chassis yet. I know they thought it'd be at Michigan. I don't believe that happened. Now they're saying it'll be at Richmond, which is one of the next 2 races. It's all old chassis, and some of the chassis are like really old, obviously refurbished, you know, but several years old. Doesn't help anything when you're doing that. Doesn't help anything when you have no notes either. The next person who wins that show this upcoming season is going to have a year's worth of notes on what not to do, and new chassis and a better modified version of the body. You know?
Yeah.
So if anything, Tyrell's kind of getting the short end of the stick.
He really is. And this is something we talked about, privately. I hope he gets an opportunity to win the seat again because his contract was for 1 year. And obviously some of it is his doing. Some of it is where Ram is at as manufacturer, but he just hasn't performed. And there are a lot of reasons for it. But yeah, he won't be back unless he gets an opportunity to win the seat again. And my guess is he will not get an opportunity. They will likely bring in a fresh crop of drivers for the show.
I could see them throwing him a bone where it's, hey, we now have our sim for Cup and for Truck. Every team needs sim drivers and development drivers. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tyrell sticks around in that phase. And if there's an opportunity to spot start a Truck, if they do the all-star Truck again, he might get a few starts there. If someone's sick one weekend, I believe he will stay with Ram. I think they really like the kid, but I don't think they like the kid enough to give him one of the other seats that's not a show seat. But unless he has a better option elsewhere, which I mean, look what Michael Christopher Jr. did this weekend. I see him being in the fold some way, just not as one of the full-time drivers.
That's a good point. Anybody's got to be better than Derek Kraus. He could do that job.
Poor Derek catching strays. Derek brings a little bit of money though, man. I heard Pratt and Miller was involved with the Dodge engine. Any truth? Are they still involved with Chevy? When you who is it that asked this question?
1870 off-road.
1870 off-road. If you're still here in the chat, please clarify, what do you mean? Are they still involved with Chevy? Because I can tell you, Pratt and Miller has heavily worked on the Ram side of things. We believe Pratt and Miller has had a hand in building the sim for the Cup team coming up and the truck team. And it was Breakhard who put out there and live on a show, so I'm just repeating what he said, that he heard they had some involvement in what was going on with the engine. He didn't specify exactly what, but yes, Pratt and Miller, in some way, shape, and or form, is involved in what Kaulig Racing and Dodge and Ram are doing.
I agree. I think at a bare minimum, they're providing engineering support. Where what that entails on a holistic level, I don't think we know, but I believe Pratt and Miller is involved with Dodge and Kaulig in some capacity. Oop, I think you're muted again.
Sorry. They would have needed to start their program months in advance. The R6P8 would need a massive redesign. It's not as massive as you think, and that's straight from the mouth of a guy that used to test the engines for Penske. The hurdle isn't as big as people would have you believe, and we're telling you now, they did start this months in advance. They've been doing this since last year, as in the calendar 2025. This is not something that has just started recently.
Yeah, honestly, when Dodge announced they were going Ram and truck racing, whenever that was, March of 2025, April 2025, I guarantee you at that point they were already thinking long term and planning something to get this thing on the track. So I would say they've already hit over a year of work on this engine. And honestly, if we talked about already, they already have the baseline. It's just putting all the components together to make it work and then manufacturing them en masse so there's enough to run a full season.
The Avid Racer F1, I believe it says at the end there, I think it's more likely that Dodge program will run a rebadge, which is basically what Breakhard was saying. He had mentioned a rebranded engine that's white labeled. The catch is, if you read the NASCAR rule book, as we talked about earlier, obviously you missed that part. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to sound like a dick. You just probably weren't here at that point in time. We believe the base block part of it, at least, still needs to be the Dodge block. The NASCAR rules, as they stand today, prohibit using another manufacturer's block. You want to read this one, dude?
Yeah. So from Tory, the Dodge engine is about the same as the Chevy engine they have run for nearly 20 years. Agreed. That's kind of where I was coming from a few minutes ago when I said the base Chevy small block 358 hasn't changed. It's been that way for decades. And all of these manufacturers are running some variation of that. So again, from that standpoint, they're not starting fresh. They have a good baseline.
We're going to take 3 more here. Keep your questions and comments coming in. We will get to the rest of them in the second Q&A break. We have a lot more notes to get to. I'm trying to light this one up. It's just not letting me. There we go. I will definitely look up that video. I love the technical aspect of NASCAR. Sadly, that info is usually hard to find. Yeah, there are multiple engineers on YouTube that have done a bunch of stuff with that R6P8 engine that they've got their hands on. It's above my pay grade. I'm a content creator and a bus driver. Ryan's actually got some experience, on the racing side of things. And even I started to nerd out a bit watching the video and seeing all the different little things they were doing with it, and made me wish I could be a fly on the wall wherever all this stuff is happening. But we both know that's not happening.
Yeah. Well, that video you sent they were in Australia, and they were using them in race boats. So that was pretty interesting. It's a lot of power for a very lightweight boat. So it was a very fun video to watch and very informative.
Do you think Justin Marks thinks, man, I should have known Hendrick was going to grab Zilisch after running JRM equipment? I think Justin Marks probably knew the day that he signed Connor Zilisch, and when Zilisch had the success he did in Xfinity at that time, that he was a ticking time bomb. That being said, there's some things happening and have been happening at Trackhouse for a while now that have some serious red flags, and we're going to talk about some of those a little later on. And then the final one, are you guys going to continue to cover SVG even after the Dodge thing happens, or is it strictly going to be Dodge teams? We're going to cover all of NASCAR as much as we can, but like our primary focus will be the Dodge teams for sure. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but we will absolutely still cover SVG and various other NASCAR things. If anything, if we can ever find time, this year's been really hard for time in terms of Ryan and I lining up our schedules. We would love to talk just more general NASCAR, and we have some of that prepared for the end of the stream. You have anything you want to add there, dude, or no?
Not really. I mean, listen, I just want to say this from a where we started standpoint. You're the SVG fans that have been so supportive of us over the years. We don't take that for granted, and we appreciate that you've helped build our platform. So we will continue to cover SVG as much as we can, as regularly as we can in our overall NASCAR topics. So he certainly will not be dropped from our conversation point. But obviously, as all of this major Dodge news comes out, that will be the primary focus for the short term. But honestly, long term, I could see a situation where SVG could join the Dodge family potentially. So more on that down the road.
All right, let's get back into our notes here. All right, so we left off with Dodge. We were told long-term Dodge would like to do the TRD thing, protects them from the Penske thing happening, but likely in their first year or two, they may have to do what now a couple of people have suggested in the chat and what Breakard was talking about on his channel and on the closing laps, and that is have a rebranded engine of sorts and white label. But again, unless rules change, it sounds like the block still needs to be a Dodge block. Kaulig is apparently rumored to be moving to Mooresville. If you've been watching this channel a very long time, like say the last 16 months, this was rumored back then. We heard possibly Lexington and we heard Mooresville. This is coming from Breakard and his co-host on the Closing Laps podcast. We heard this early last year and reported it on the channel, and all kind of went silent. As it stands today, they currently have 4 shops on the RCR campus that they own, or at least I know they own 2 of them for sure, and the property that they're on. But there's not enough space. If you've listened to Chris Rice over the last 5 or 6 weeks, he's brought it up multiple times. There isn't enough space. Chris Rice talked about on TMD much earlier this year that they'd love to move into somewhere bigger. It would make sense that if you're going to Dodge and Cup, you have the 5 Rams. We'll talk about the potential of O'Reilly later on just a little bit. But it would make sense to have one big shop to have everybody, run out of the same shop. I do wonder how that'll affect some staff if it happens, being, Mooresville's 50 minutes away from Welcome, North Carolina. Well, if someone's in the opposite direction half an hour or 45 minutes from work, their half an hour or 45-minute drive just turned into an hour and a half to an hour and 45-minute drive. So these things happen, though, when a company switches location. I stress this is just a rumor. I would love to call it factual. I believe it's going to happen because we've heard this from other people. But yeah, there could be some other reasons for wanting to leave their current location that aren't space related. We reached out to a couple of team members, and one denied any knowledge of them moving, but did say, I think everybody here would like to be in one shop rather than spread out. Um, and the other team member did not feel, who's fairly high up, did not feel confident, or I don't think confident is the right word. He didn't want to comment on the situation as if he might know something. Um, Ryan, does this make sense, man? Like, you can have four small shops wherever, but um, within 10-15 minutes of one another. Um, it's not a great way to run a race team.
It's not. It's a logistical nightmare. And, listen, this time last year, we were slothing around looking at potential buildings that we thought maybe were sold and potentially something that Kaulig was looking to invest in.
There have been two sold recently
Yeah.
in Mooresville. I did the homework, and they're both big and look like they could be race shops. And keep in mind, Trackhouse is also, they're building a new shop in Mooresville.
Yeah. So, and listen, they ended up buying the R Motorsports or renting the R Motor. I think they bought it though. Old shop. And in fact, they hired some of those employees to work on the truck program.
Yeah, they made it their fab shop.
They made it their fab. So you have that building is their fab shop. They have another building where they have to keep the Dodges separate from the Chevys, and that building is where they're doing the trucks. And then they've got the the same two buildings they've been using for Cup and Xfinity at the time. It's a logistical mess. So,
and then a storage building.
Right. So obviously they could continue to do that. And I think the real question is, do they have the bandwidth to deal with that now? Right. They are neck deep in trying to get the Cup car ready for next year while performing this year, while dealing with the Rams and trying to build performance there. Do they have the bandwidth to get a new shop purchased and moved? And, that's a process. That is not a small thing. So that would be my only, I guess, hesitation this year would be they are so occupied with getting the Cup car ready that they might just not have the bandwidth to have that done in time for the upcoming season. That said, they are on RCR's campus, and while they do own those buildings, they are kind of intruding currently, and I think it would be best for both parties to go their separate ways for many reasons. I think Kaulig definitely wants to get to their own property, have the space. Obviously, that's the number one factor, but they just have a big RC headache looming over their shoulders constantly. So I really think they want to get this thing done and into their own space and not have to deal with the politics that come with being on the property with RCR. So yeah, I think they will do it, but will it be in time for 2027? I have my doubts.
If Stellantis wants them to have their own space, they will have their own space. It really is that simple. I'm sure Matt Kaulig, knowing how he is, knowing how he doesn't really like to take on other investors, would probably like to just buy the building himself. But these are really big buildings, right? Keep in mind, you need sim for both Cup and truck. That takes up space. And Chris Rice has said multiple times on TMD, their current engineering group does not have enough space. So it's not like you just get an engine from wherever, and we'll speculate on that in a second recklessly, and just throw it in the car. You then have your own engineers, which they've hired a bunch of, work on that engine, and they need space in order to do that. So, yeah, I see it happening. It just depends how long it's been going on for, right? This is where it's hard when people say you can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. You can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. People could connect the dots a little better if we could talk about something. I did just check back in one of our conversations, so I will say this. There are other parties who possibly don't want Kaulig Racing there anymore. But it's, you can not want someone there all you want, but if someone owns the buildings, it's not just, get the hell out of Dodge, pun intended. There are legal things that need to be done in order to even begin to investigate those situations. Give me 1 second here, dude. I'm here. I had to turn on my AC. I'm dying. And I would like to not die before, all this comes to light. All right, is the background noise too much?
I think it's fine.
Okay. Recklessly speculating a little here. Roush Yates is located in Mooresville. And I can't help but wonder if they have struck a deal, aka the Jordan Bianchi article, to have Roush Yates build their engines for a year or two. I don't think it would need to be 3. As it is, Roush Yates already builds engines for different manufacturers in different sports. And Yates, believe it or not, used to build the Petty Enterprise engines back in, I think it was like either from 01 to 04, or 02 to 04. So there's a history here. That being said, it's a little reckless speculation, but as you pointed out, hey, the numbers game is unless Pratt and Miller is going to take up the whole thing themselves, or with another side company, engineering company, or you have a O'Reilly team come in, or even Ilmore come in and do it for you. The options are kind of limited. But it should be said, you cannot go off of geography just because Kaulig might be moving to Mooresville, and that just so happens to be where Roush Yates is located. It would make things easier. Let's remember that TRD is quite literally located on the West Coast, and Joe Gibbs Racing's nowhere close to the West Coast. So, but I do think there could be something there, man. And in terms of past connections and the fact that Roush Yates has a huge engine program, maybe people drew the wrong connection there when we seen that Roush Yates Engines was going to do a Ram truck. Everyone's like, oh, RFK's moving over. Oh, Brad Keselowski already ruled that out. Maybe it's not RFK moving over. Maybe it's Roush Yates being the engine supplier off of a Dodge block for Kaulig Racing and Dodge and Stellantis for the next year or two.
Yeah, that was interesting. I learned something with that. That we all associate Roush Yates engines with Ford, obviously, but they do have side businesses that they do dirt modified work. For I think we saw Pontiac, and they're doing other stuff with. They have 2 or 3 different engines that they build, not just the Cup engine. So, again, you're talking, resources and allocation. Do they have the bandwidth, the staffing to support this process? Yeah, that's to be determined. But I think, again, what we know for sure is that Kaulig and Ram currently don't have the resources to build their own engines this year, which means they need somebody else to build it. And we've already done the numbers game. The 4 core OEMs that are building engines now, Pratt and Whitney, I think, or Pratt and Miller, sorry, they certainly could provide some support. But you're saying these Xfinity teams, right? When you say that, I just want to, for the masses, we're talking Jeremy Clements Racing and Mike Harmon Racing, okay?
To be clear, I am not saying that. It is a NASCAR reporter that I can't mention that mentioned that possibility.
No, I'm not saying it's not. It's of course it could be happening. I'm just saying when you talk about the quality of these teams, and I don't want to diss on those teams, but are they good enough to build Cup engines? They're good enough to refurbish 20-year-old engines for their teams, but are they really in a position to build Cup engines? Probably not. So again, I won't say it's discredited and say it can't happen with those smaller Xfinity O'Reilly teams. But I really do think the numbers say it's either going to be a large engineering firm or one of the 4 existing teams. And we do know that it seems like some, a deal fell through already, and that, there's only a handful of available options. So, reading the tea leaves for this to work, you're really looking at, it's either going to be a Roush Yates or a Pratt and Miller, really, in my opinion. So,
or a combination of the two
or
working
a
together in
combination
order
of,
to get it done.
you're right. At the end of the day, right? You said this earlier, and Breakhard touched on this. The white label aspect of this, it doesn't, the final assembly point doesn't really matter. The block's going to say Dodge, but it's going to be some concoction of engineers from outside sources putting this thing together if it comes to fruition.
I'll say this. Again, this is more speculating. And again, I can't say the one thing. I don't think there's a world where Hendrick Motorsports would take a different manufacturer's block and rebrand it and white label it. I don't think there's any amount of money in the world for them to do that. I don't think TRD will do it either. They're on the West Coast. It's already not super convenient for them to get the engines over to JGR. That leaves 2 left, at least from the Cup Series teams. And the point I'm making here is Ryan said maybe to RCR. I said no. And I wish we could get further into that conversation, but we cannot. I would say this. If there's only one, then Roush Yates, if it is Roush Yates, and not, third-party company and Pratt and Miller and whoever doing it, or, Dodge's, they do have an SRT division, unless they've managed to be able to do it in-house themselves right away, which I think is a long-term plan. Look, whoever does it, specifically if it's a current team in the Cup or current engine builder in the Cup Series, is going to bend Stellantis over the barrel, and they are going to pay out the fucking ass for a year or two, probably an uncomfortable amount of money to make this thing happen. We're talking the likes of, who was the team that went Furniture Row went out of business, over the Joe Gibbs deal. Who was the other team? The 95.
Oh yeah, Levine family. Yeah.
Yeah, both of those guys ended up having good equipment. Both of them paid out the ass, and both of them paid for it. If Stellantis is doing this, any way you cut it, regardless of who it is, the bill is going to be enormous.
Kaulig couldn't pay this. It will, because the only way this works is because the OEM is willing to write a blank check to make it happen, right? And this is, to me, where the Tim Kuniskis aspect comes in, and the, from all things we've seen and all things we've heard from him, is he is willing to, turn water into wine to make this happen at all costs. And when we say at all costs, we really mean this, because they are currently investing tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars at this point, to get this show up and operational. It's an incredible thing that they are doing. And, I think the long-term concern is they're going to flame out. They're going to spend too much up front, not see a return. But they are all in today to make this happen. And they are seemingly willing to spend whatever it costs to make it happen.
Let's see, going through the notes here. Will Dodge have more than 2 cars on track in 2027 if they indeed make it on time? I don't think they will have more than 2 cars full time. I think you're looking at AJ Allmendinger and another driver that won't be named Ty Dillon. But I think they will absolutely have a need to run a third open car at times. And if the rules allow it, I believe you could even run a 4th open car part-time. What is it, up to 5 races or something like that? I expect to see some part-time Kaulig Racing Dodges on track next year just for the fact of needing information. Although I will put this out there, Breakhard mentioned that Rickware Racing might be setting up in Mooresville too, and they said to watch out for that. Now, it wasn't really clarified if that meant Dodge slash Kaulig could buy out what's remaining of Rickware's company. If that would mean buying the charter eventually, like I don't think anybody wants to pay $80 to $100 million for a charter. I don't even think Dodge wants to do that. But I do think you would see more than 2 cars on track at select tracks. But full time, no. I at this point, I think it's almost guaranteed to be the 2 Kaulig cars.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be the 2 Kaulig cars plus an open car. I would say 10 to 15 races where they can. Now, I personally believe
similar to Corey Heim this year.
Yeah, very similar to Corey Heim. I think that's the perfect use case for where we're going to be next year. And I look at it this way, and I know we're going to touch on this, so I'll keep this part brief. My assumption is they're going to hire a driver not named Corey LaJoy or Justin Haley to drive the 10. And then one of Justin Haley or Corey LaJoy will drive the 3rd car part-time. That's just my guess. That's where I'm going with that. So, because obviously you need a driver to drive the 3rd car that's going to give you good feedback. You're not just going to throw, again, sorry, Derek Kraus. You're not going to throw Derek Kraus in the 3rd car, 12 times.
Well, let's throw out a name. I know it's a little further down the list, but we're going off the board here. We're not off the board, but we're getting scrambled here where their notes a bit. Let's throw out the name that we've talked about with someone on X who's had a decent amount of information, right? We won't say who it is, but they said they heard that Lane Riggs might be Dodge bound, but they thought it might be with a different team. But we don't think there's going to be a different team. So if Lane Riggs is Dodge bound, it could be with Kaulig Racing, right? It sounds like Noah is going to stay in the 4 car. I think Lane Riggs would be a good long-term bet. Is it a shoe-in? Far from it. And it makes me wonder, hey, if the check is big enough, would Lane Riggs accept, a 10 to 15 race cup deal next year and then drive one of the Rams full time to help that program along? And then Lane Riggs becomes the next driver for Dodge. Like there's in terms of getting paid well by a team and a manufacturer, there's no better option at this point on the cup level. I'm just wondering, would he accept a part-time ride and then maybe it's Haley or LaJoy in the other car? I really don't want it to be LaJoy. I don't think it's gone too well for him this year. But frankly, it hasn't gone too well for Haley either.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you bring up a good idea. It could work. Again, that's the Corey Heim route. And, we've seen kind of how that's benefited Corey Heim to run trucks. Well, this year he's all over the board, but, running consistently in the lower series and slowly building up his cup experience. Yeah, I could see that being, from a Kaulig standpoint, from a Dodge standpoint, a smart way of doing business. But my assumption here is Lane Riggs has reached that Zane Smith, Corey Heim level of he's too good to be in trucks at this point. He's winning every single race and doing it convincingly. So I don't think he would like to. I don't see him jumping ship for a part-time ride. I feel like if he goes cup racing, it will be in a full-time situation. And frankly, there just aren't a lot of open seats in the Cup Series this year. And what seats have opened have quickly closed. So if he is in fact trying to go cup racing, I think Kaulig is a great spot. And I think Kaulig they've been trying to get a young driver for a while. They've tried it with, Chandler Smith. That didn't work out. They've tried it with Christian Eckes. That didn't work out. Maybe the timing has finally aligned for Lane Riggs. And I think it has. I think Lane Riggs will be in the 10 car next year. No concrete evidence to it. My gut feeling says he'll be in that 10 car.
Well, they did. The person who messaged us, and again, I'm not going to name them because they didn't say it was okay to be named, but mentioned that even the front row, I forget his title, general manager, president, or something like that, said he expects Lane Riggs will be in the Cup Series very soon, despite saying that all of his cars are full. So that tells me that Lane Riggs has some landing spot. Who knows? Maybe it's RCR. God, I hope not. But Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Money talks, right? If you can get yourself 10 to 15 cup starts or 12 cup starts while still remaining in trucks and you got a long-term future there, then maybe that's possible. I would rather just see him in the 10 car. Take the growing pains. A.J. Allmendinger's your Bill Elliott. Lane Riggs is your Casey Atwood, and see what happens, right? So, what else do we have here? Because I got scrambled. What is the likely cutoff date? Ryan mentioned September 1st. I'll be honest, I can't see it being much later than that, guys. If it is later than that, it's by like a couple of weeks at most. As much as NASCAR wants to hold their hand through all this and is really pushing for this thing to happen, you got to have a date where this thing gets cut off at. And who knows? It could, despite Bianchi and Dale Jr. and Breakheart and the NWP guys and even us and a few other reporters that we can't name, all believing it's far more likely that it happens than it doesn't. There is still a world where this doesn't happen. So we'll see, but I certainly hope it does. What else do we have here? Who will drive the 10 car? I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to be someone they already have, and that a third car would go to a Lane Riggs or a prospect of some sort that they'd run out there quite a bit. And Ryan, you said Lane Riggs. What is the likely route of the engines? For me, without getting too specific, I would say it is probably going to be long-term TRD route. That's what they will work to. But at the beginning, it will be a lot of rebranded technology and white labeled on a Dodge R6 P8 block.
I agree. I think we're going to see an outsourced engine for the next 2 years using, people that already know what they're doing. Like that's the risk. And I think that's the roadblock they're dealing with is, do you trust a third party engineering team to come in and build a cup engine? And I don't think they do. So I think it's going to be a hodgepodge of outside engineering support, outside, build support from other building organizations. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit of Frankenstein situation, but they are likely going to get something on track next year.
Will Kaulig Racing move to a new shop? I think yes, eventually. I don't think it's sustainable where they are now, even though they own possibly all 4 buildings.
I agree. 2027, I would be surprised. But again, along the lines of where they're going with the investment of having the Dodge engine program, they're going to have their own space. I just think it'll be closer to 2028.
What other teams could switch to Dodge what should we expect of Dodge? I think we already answered that one. What other teams could switch to Dodge in the first couple of years? Look, if there's anyone else that's switching in year one, it's either kind of like what you just seen with MBM and trucks, and you've seen how well that went for them. They DNQ'd. It's a team that doesn't have a charter, and if it is a charter team, the only 2 I think that are even conceivable of switching would be Rick Ware or Hayek.
Yeah, I 2027 Kaulig exclusive, 2.5 cars. 2028, then I think that's where things get a little more interesting. Again, at this point, we're just speculating, but I absolutely see a world where, Trackhouse is fed up with Hendrick stealing Connor Zilisch and needs a fresh start. I could see a Trackhouse jumping ship. I could see an RCR jumping ship down the road at some point. Obviously Pop doesn't want to leave Chevy, but there will be a day when Austin Dillon takes the reins of that organization, and I could see them at some point making that switch. But listen, the magic number, we've kind of figured this out. Look at Toyota. They've got, how many cars do they have now? 10? I think they've got 10 or 11. Like the sweet spot is 8.
They're years away from getting there.
No, and I agree. They are years away, but I think the sweet spot is 8 to 10. So I believe the long-term goal for Dodge is to get to that 8 to 10 number, which tells me that at some point they will have at least 3 teams, whether that's 2028 or 2030. We'll see. But right out of the gate, it's Kaulig and what Kaulig is capable of doing with a third card part-time.
Let's see. What do we have here? Apologies for the background noises. I had to turn the AC back on. Will Dodge struggle as bad as Ram has this year, and why is Ram struggling? I call me naive, unintelligent, flat out stupid. I don't think they will struggle as bad. One, I absolutely believe AJ Allmendinger is a better driver than anybody that they have down in the Truck Series, and he turns chicken shit into chicken salad and has for years. Two, we talked about it earlier, the spec chassis, and a lot of other things that are spec on those cars. Three, I honestly think the fact that, and we know this from talking with Mike Cook last year in our 4-part series, is, well, you can't take, like, say, your setup notes from a Toyota and transfer them all over to Ford or Chevrolet, or in this case, Dodge. Some things do work. So they're not starting with a completely blank notebook or a completely blank team that you got to fill up with people. Yes, some of the Kaulig trucks have members from the Kaulig Xfinity crew, but they are working on new equipment, and then you had way more new hires than existing people there. It is like an expansion draft on a professional sports team without the advantage that the Las Vegas Golden Knights had in the NHL, right? Plus, as Breakart said, the wind tunnel numbers were way behind the other manufacturers. If you look at every team's best driver yesterday, or sorry, every manufacturer's best driver, Bosie has the stat over on he has a great new analytics thing that he's been doing. The best Ram driver was way behind the other 3 manufacturers' best drivers on average lap time. I think they had some hope. I think we all had some hope yesterday, given how practice went for them, and at least clean in qualifying. But if anybody's ever done iRacing, or if anybody's ever done real racing that isn't, short stints, you can cheat your setup a little bit. You can have it real good in the short run, even if your overall setup isn't good, and then you fall off like a rock. I don't know this for fact, but it really feels like those Ram trucks yesterday were hoping for a fair amount of cautions, and they had a short run 10 to 15 lap setup, because after 15 laps, Ryan, those things fell off like no tomorrow. I just think they were more focused on getting to the track this year than actually developing. And again, as we said, we can line up the timeline. Dodge did not tell Kaulig that they were their team until April, according to Ty Norris last year, April 2025. And Dodge's production on the Ram stuff really began in January of 2025. They've had a longer runway here for the Cup Series on engine and on body, although it sounds like your initial engine intention obviously fell through. I don't think they'll be as bad, but I think Ram's struggling, and I absolutely think they'll be better next year. They had no notebook whatsoever, a bunch of new pieces. I'm not saying they'll be winning a bunch of races. I still think Ram could run into a super speedway win here, possibly even a road course win. But I just don't think they'll be as far behind, and I know some people think that's ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this brief because you basically just touched on it all. A couple key factors. They've never been a truck organization before. They came in with no notes. So they were starting from nothing from a Truck Series standpoint. That's a big deal. As you mentioned, as Breakard mentioned, their body aerodynamically just way off. And you touched on it. Honestly, Dodge introduced their their body before they did anything else. That body was the first thing they did. It just didn't get honed. They said, oh, this has been approved by NASCAR. Here it is. It's clear this year that they've had multiple opportunities to take the Challenger body to the wind tunnel and work on it. It's not going to be the best. I'm not expecting it to be a rock star out of the gates, but they've had many more opportunities, it seems like, to get the aerodynamic side of it right, or at least in the ballpark, where they didn't have that in the truck series. So when you're talking spec engine, everybody's running the Lumar engine, well, whatever it is. You know, your whole lifeblood is your body and your aerodynamics. And if you're off significantly, you're out to lunch. It doesn't matter how good your drivers are. Doesn't matter how good your equipment is. And by the way, their chassis are old. They're using Spire chassis. They're using, oh my God. I saw like
Kyle
KBM.
Busch, yeah.
Like
Young.
4 different teams. Young's Motorsports, which they were terrible. So, I mean, they're using a hodgepodge of old chassis that weren't, you know, obviously the KBM chassis were good at one point, but they ran their course at this point. So they had a lot. There's a lot of reasons why this Ram was off this year that I just don't expect would be the case with the Cup car.
Yeah, I also think there's just been so much attention to the Cup car trying to get it for 2027 that, you know, they're just pulling people left and right, and whoever can help, you know, go one more step and one more step or a half a step or a quarter step to getting this thing to happen, they're going to do it, right? I know we were also told this week that there is a I want to watch how I word this, ex NASCAR Cup Series crew chief that is really at the helm of developing, I wouldn't say developing, but guiding and overseeing the development of the body and the engine. And we don't know who that name is. I don't even want to ask someone the question because they're probably going to tell me to fuck off. But yeah, they're very guarded of who gets to go in that shop right now for obvious reasons. What else do we got here? The O'Reilly series / pipeline. Look, dude, when you were gone, whether it was the last stream or on X, a lot of people keep asking about the O'Reilly series. There's not a chance in hell that is happening next year. 0% chance. I don't know if it'll happen the year after. Look, the simple fact is this: a lot of people feel like the trucks are closer to the Cup cars, and the O'Reilly series is more kind of out in no man's land, which is a problem, right? So, do I think it'll happen eventually? Yeah. I think Stellantis would want it. I can't even guarantee you it'd be Kaulig Racing that does it. We know Chris Rice is going to want it, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean,
no time soon.
Yeah, no time soon. I agree. And listen, look at Ford. Ford has all but pulled out of the O'Reilly series at this point. They just aren't there. I think Ryan Sieg, Kyle Sieg are the only 2 Fords in the field right now. So it's from the OEM standpoint, and I love the O'Reilly cars. They race so good. But right now they're old technology. They race well. They don't need to change them, but they are almost an independent series at this point. You know, yes, they have the NASCAR label, but they are to me, as I would say, the O'Reilly cars are now as foreign to the Cup car as IndyCar is foreign to the Cup car. It's that big a difference. So while I think they would love to have a presence in that series down the road, it doesn't benefit them at all right now. Maybe in the Gen 8 car, or if they make wholesale changes to the Gen 7 car that align it more with the O'Reilly cars, then maybe there will be a reason to go back to that platform. But there is a reason your Zane Smiths and your Carson Hosevars and now your Corey Himes, and honestly, Lane Riggs, I believe, will be the next one, are going from trucks to Cup. There is absolutely no reason to make the stop in the O'Reilly series at this point. So there's no reason to have an O'Reilly car, you know, from a performance standpoint if you're a manufacturer. So while I do think down the road they will get into that series, it will not be in the next couple of years. And to your point, I could very easily see it not being Kaulig at all.
Yeah, I could see one of the O'Reilly teams who wants to get factory support end up doing that for Stellantis, and maybe with longer term ambitions and goals, etc. But yeah, I could see it not being Kaulig at all. Final prediction, man. Will 2027 happen for Dodge? The figurative gun to the head. You got to get it right. Is it going to happen?
Yes. I felt that way from the start.
I'm going to say it's going to happen, but just from some of the things we've heard, including a few of the things we can't talk about, I'm less confident in it today than I was a month ago. A month ago, I'd say I was like 95 to 99%. Today, I'd say I'm like 75%, but that's still a damn good chance of it happening.
Yeah.
I'm also, hey, Ryan's glass half full guy. I'm glass half empty guy. That's been our relationship for years.
Listen, I'll really, all I'll say from my perspective on this, I really appreciate the people we talk to. They are in the know. They are very smart folks that we get a chance to talk to. But Jordan Bianchi don't miss. Jordan Bianchi is the most accurate, consistent reporter in NASCAR. And if he tells you there's a good chance it's happening, then there's a good chance it's happening. So if Bianchi hadn't come out and said what he said, I would be right there with you in the maybe even less than 75%. But the Bianchi factor on its own makes me extremely confident it will happen. That he knows something that I'm guessing even the people we talk to don't know.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's try to go through some of these questions quickly so we can get to our final topics here. I got to get rid of that border. It's just fucking with my eyes. Yeah, SVG will race whatever. I remember when people thought Chase Briscoe was a Ford lifer, but then he went to JGR. Yeah, well, if that 19 seat opened up for me, I would have flown out of there like a bat out of hell too. So, do you think Kaulig brings back LaJoy in some capacity?
I do. They have 5 truck seats to fill. If he wants to race full time next year, I believe he will be driving a Ram truck.
Yeah, I don't believe he should be doing anything more at the Cup Series other than if they're running a part-time car 10 to 15 times, maybe getting a couple of those races at places he's good at. Spally says SVG's wife is fairly high up in Chev. Would be difficult to go to another brand. Yeah, it would be difficult for sure, but not impossible.
And I'm going to reiterate this as I said earlier, and I forgive me if this comes off as rude. It doesn't fucking matter. It just doesn't. The teams have contracts with manufacturers. If he wants to stay with Chevy, he will re-sign with Trackhouse, and I think he might. I know we're losing Connor Zilisch. I believe Justin Marks and Trackhouse will give SVG the Brinks truck to make him their number one driver at Trackhouse. So he will likely stay. But if he chooses to go to a different team because they are offering him more money or better opportunity, then he will do that and he will drive for whatever manufacturer that team is. Period. Point blank.
For sure. Like if Penske moved on from Hendrick and they wanted to pursue him, I could see that being an option. I don't see another HMS ride opening up soon. They all seem accounted for now. If a Gibbs ride opened up, maybe, right? But like, here, I'll kill half of one of our topics that we have coming up. Breakheart said, and this is a direct quote from him, obviously Zilisch is basically all but gone now. That's been confirmed by The Athletic. But he expects Chastain to go too. Chastain might be someone that Dodge and Kaulig are looking at because of previous relationships. But he expects Chastain to go. So if you're Justin Marks, you're probably a little worried, right? And you have not been performing very well this year outside of SVG. So yeah, the Brinks truck I would expect would get backed up in order to keep him in house, and then you'll get yourself another driver or two, or maybe you sell a charter and you go down to 2. Maybe they end up becoming the second major Dodge team. Who knows? But things aren't great there. Here, I'll kill the topic altogether. They had Ty Norris outside of the shit at Michael Waltrip Racing that happened, one of the best behind the scenes NASCAR executives you can get, working without a contract, giving everybody in the organization their contracts, but he could not get one. And so he went to Kaulig, where he got a nice fat one. And his direct quote from this week is, "I seen things happening there that were a red flag to me, more than just his contract thing." I would say, I mean, it's easy for him to say that in hindsight now as Trackhouse is struggling, but Ty's a smart guy, and I think he had a point. I think there's some cleaning up that needs to happen at Trackhouse. Brian, any quick thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, when they lost Pitbull as an investor out of the blue, I felt something in the force was off, and I don't know what that is. But 3 years ago they were a championship 4 team. Now they're a mid-pack team, and they've fallen quickly. And listen, SVG on merit is running in the 13th in the points, right? He's run well at ovals. He's obviously dominated the road courses. He's doing what he needs to do. And one of your favorite terms with AJ is he's turned chicken shit into chicken salad all year long for this team. So, I give him immense credit for what he's been able to do this year. But obviously Trackhouse has issues they need to work out. Obviously losing Zilisch is a huge blow. They're going to, I feel, do everything in their power to retain him and build around him. And I think that's a great thing for Trackhouse. And I believe that will keep, at a bare minimum, their performance at a playoff level, just because SVG is talented enough to do that for them.
Yeah, I mean, when you got Bianchi and others saying it's all but done that he signs with Hendrick, which you can do. I mean, Casey Kane did it.
Tyler Reddick just a few years ago.
Yeah, like this isn't unknown. Like you can negotiate in NASCAR anyways your next contract, even if it's a couple years away ahead of time. And yeah, it does make you a bit of a lame duck guy. And I'm sure Connor is going to be given no favors next year at Trackhouse unless Chevy really, really, really wants them to push for it. Keep in mind, Trackhouse's engine deal is not with Hendrick. It is with RCR.
That would be my negotiating tactic. Personally, if Trackhouse was smart, they would figure out a way to get Hendrick motors next year.
Dollar bills, y'all. You better be willing to write a big check. So, do you think RCR switch to Dodge? Simple answer. Yes, if and when Richard Childress ever goes away and the Dillons get their way. We believe the Dillons already wanted to go to Dodge, and Grandpa said no.
Yeah, and I believe there was something even with the former CEO of Stellantis was good friends with the RCR team. So I definitely think there is a future there. Well, again, whether that's 2 years from now, 4 years from now, or a decade from now, I do think they will very realistically have a shot at becoming a Dodge team.
Odds of seeing Dodge in the O'Reilly Series, almost 0% next year is my guess. And 2, 3, 4 years down the road, they'll be back with someone. I'm not convinced it'll be Kaulig. Why isn't this one showing? I believe they worked with Chevy in other series. I'm not sure exactly. I'm assuming you mean Dodge
I think Roush Yates engines.
Or Roush Yates, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Nathan. How you doing, buddy? Trying to get this engine development one to show. To save time on engine development, why doesn't Kaulig/Dodge use a OEM engine development company? They very well likely are using a OEM engine development company. I just think they are having to take two paths right now. One, a long-term path, and two, a bit of a rushed path. So,
yeah, the tea leaves say that's where this is going. So, again, what the final outlook will be is still to be determined, but it certainly feels like that's how they're going to be on track in 2027.
Nathan says, or asks, do you know if Dodge added another for next year? You mean team? Technically, on an official matter, they don't have anybody, but it's going to be Kaulig. And we already mentioned if it's anyone else, it's a non-chartered team or a Hayek or a Rick Ware. There won't be anyone else. SVG has worked with Kaulig before. Yes, he has. I can definitely see SVG joining the Dodge Boys in the future. Yeah, like, hey, if I'm Trackhouse right now and I
I'm
can't get a
pissed.
better position at GM and how things have gone, I'm genuinely considering moving to Dodge
Yeah.
in 2028 if Kaulig's not a disaster in year one.
Listen, they really wanted to go with Honda when Honda was rumored to be this close to joining NASCAR. I certainly think they aren't afraid to switch manufacturers. I definitely they would likely be my, if I had to put odds on the next team to join Dodge, it would be Trackhouse.
What do we think about MBM Motorsports trying to qualify a Kaulig Ram number? Well, I don't know if it was a Kaulig Ram. I don't know if it was a old purchased Kaulig Ram or if they, did up the body themselves. I don't know any of that, but I can guarantee you that team had, other than vocal support, had no on-track support from Ram, and I'm I'm not surprised. I'm really not. Like Ryan mentioned it earlier, if they're that far behind in the body development, which according to Breakard and others they are, and that'll be a big focus in this off season coming up. Then you're really behind when you're a team that small.
Yeah,
I would
and they need
expect
a better
more.
driver. Period. There's
Yeah,
a lot of reasons for why they didn't make it on Sunday, or Friday, but driver for one, and whether they used an old Kaulig body or they built one themselves, that program is on a budget, nickel store budget on a good day. So I think they will eventually get there. It sounds like they might try to run Rams full time going forward, but they're going to have a upward, hard road to hoe for sure this year.
yeah, I think there are more DNQs ahead, unfortunately. SVG could stay loyal to Justin Marks. Yeah, but again, money talks, right? Money talks, and the positioning of the team talks. SVG is no spring chicken, right? Like he wants the best chance to win. If the Penske 2 opens up and they wanted him there, you're probably jumping ship. Sorry, you just probably are. Even if you're SVG, even if your wife works at Chevy. Last year we were being told by all the SVG fans he wouldn't drive anything other than a Ford in the future, and that Trackhouse would switch to Ford. I don't see that happening. So I shouldn't say all the SVG fans, but some SVG fans.
I expect them to back the Brinks truck up, and I expect him to be the number one driver at Trackhouse for the next decade. I do believe that.
I did not know Yates built petty engines. Yes, they did for a few years. SVG to Dodge ain't happening. He's a Chevy guy. It's going to take several seasons for them to. It's probably going to take Dodge 2 or 3 seasons at least to be up there winning races, maybe even more. But money talks, and if Trackhouse is paying him the most money and Trackhouse switches to Dodge, SVG will switch to Dodge, as Ryan has pointed out. You can be a Chevy guy all you want. Money talks, and unless Chevy's going to get him into a better ride, which they can absolutely move things behind the scenes. Anything's possible. Who is this? Tim Kaniskis is absolutely 100% committed to doing what they have to do to be present in Cup and competition next season. Yeah, but even Tim's got to realize there's deadlines that have already been pushed by, Ryan mentioned it earlier, over half a year now. They're half a year over the rule book deadline, people. So they're trying. We'll see what happens. What I'm talking about is a truck. They added MBM, or MBM added them, but they did not add another factory back team. No, that did not happen. Ryan, can you read this one?
Yeah.
If it'll show up. There we go.
they have to have a second team from a development standpoint. And remember, up to this point, Kaulig has been using used rebodied chassis on their trucks. They don't have to have a second team. They want a second team, but they don't have to have a second team. And again, this is why we've been saying this all episode, and we've been saying this in other episodes. We believe they will run at a cup level a third truck part-time, or sorry, a third car part-time to try to expedite that developmental process. Frankly, it's why they're running 5 trucks this year. From a performance standpoint, that was a poor decision, but they are getting more notes by running 5 trucks this year than they would have if they were running 3. So they're doing what they need to do to make it work with Kaulig, in what capacity that looks like.
Before I pull up another question here, because we only have one more topic to get to on our notes, so I just want to quickly comment on it, and we kind of touched on it earlier, and we can just answer these questions and go. Not that we don't appreciate your guys' time. We do. You guys have been a great chat once again. This is 2 wildly successful streams in a row, so we really appreciate it. But Alex Bowman certainly sounds like a guy. I know we had him as like a dark horse. Dodge Stellantis could pay him a bunch of money. After hearing his interviews this weekend, seeing what he'd said to some of the reporters that they were reporting on, this sounds like a guy that is ready to be done. His body's obviously taken a beating, physically and mentally. You can tell the passion is 100% not there anymore. And it's almost like he's doing Hendrick a solid by sticking around a year.
Yeah. I mentioned this briefly earlier. The reason he signed a 1-year deal to come back to Hendrick is because Connor Zilisch is contracted to Trackhouse next year. I believe firmly that if they could have gotten Connor Zilisch in the 48 next year, they would have done it, and Alex Bowman would have ridden off quietly into the sunset. But because I agree, I think he's doing Hendrick a solid. Obviously, Ally loves him. They're going to do a 1-year swan song. And we'll see what happens. And I just quickly want to note on this. I have a friend who knows Alex Bowman on a personal level. We talk about him actually every once in a while. Bowman has been going back and forth on what he wanted to do. Like, he was torn as of a month ago if he wanted to come back next year. So it's not surprising that this is the outcome. And I think, especially with the vertigo situation that he dealt with earlier this year, he wouldn't have gotten to go out on the way he wanted to go out this year. So I think a few things came about to give him one last opportunity to have his, farewell tour. And I think he'll make the most of it. But yeah, he's ready to do other things. And he said himself, he'll still continue to be part of the Hendrick family, doing certain things with Hendrick, even once he retires full time. So he will not be leaving Hendrick even once he's done driving that 48 car. You muted again.
Bloody hell. The second team might be Trackhouse or RCR in 2028. I think Dodge would love to have RCR, just, to be able to bring ECR into it, and then have all their satellite teams have to choose between switching manufacturers to Dodge or, finding another engine for their cup programs. That's definitely a tactic, but I truthfully do not see it happening while Richard Childress is still there.
Agreed. Richard Childress is the hurdle that it's his show until he either dies or willingly gives up control to Austin. They will not switch until then. But listen, it would make Dodge's life a lot easier if they could get RCR. As you said, they have that ECR connection, but that seems to just not be the direction they're going currently. But again, I do think Trackhouse is a real possibility 2028 and beyond.
Trackhouse is building up in Kannapolis. I don't know if that's close to Mooresville. I heard Mooresville. I'm Canadian. Ask Ryan. He's American. Nathan Campbell says Rick Ware bought by Tony Stewart. and comes back to Dodge. Yeah, that's not going to happen, bud. But I think just remember what we said earlier in the stream. I could see a number 14 Dodge on track at the Daytona 500. Ram is a setup issue. Wasn't a truck team before. It absolutely is partially a setup issue, but the numbers don't lie. Bosie's posted them. Breakard's posted them. Their body is miles behind the other three manufacturers right now, and that's something that they'll have an opportunity to go and figure out this off season and close that gap. I heard a rumor that Dodge submitted a body to NASCAR, ARCA body for 2027. I don't know about ARCA, but I can tell you that Butterbean is running a Dodge Charger tonight. I forget that series he's in. Is it ARCA?
I don't think it's ARCA. He's running late models. They do have a Dodge approved late model chassis or body. Yeah.
Let's see. Ram needed a body. That was about it for trucks, engine, and spec. Yeah, they're building new chassis too. Remember, there's also that rumor that the truck chassis and body could change here in a couple of years, so they might be a little wary how much money they spend in that.
Yeah. Also, honestly, my concern is same with the Cup deal. For a truck body or even an O'Reilly body, it has to be approved by NASCAR. My concern is they haven't been working on an upgraded body. Maybe they are silently, but that would also need to be approved by NASCAR to make that switch for 2027. So they might not have a new body next year, which would be really disappointing if they don't.
SVG is starting to become Trackhouse. I mean, I never completely write off Ross Chastain, but if Breakard thinks Chastain's as good as gone, and the Athletic thinks Zilisch is close to signing a deal with Hendrick, yeah, SVG is absolutely becoming Trackhouse.
Yeah, again, Ross Chastain, this is obviously, I'm just kind of getting to the hearing about this. He obviously could go to a different team, but again, there aren't a lot of better opportunities out there. Like, I could see him staying at Trackhouse simply because there aren't any open seats. Maybe Kaulig, maybe the two, but there aren't a lot to choose from, even for Chastain.
Where is it here? Rick Ware ran Dodges in the NASCAR Canada Series. Rick Ware runs a lot of things, though, in a lot of different series. SVG has driven Ford and Chevy in Supercar. Is that what that says? I can't get it to highlight properly.
Yeah, and it also said Holden, which I'm not familiar with. Maybe that's a brand down in Australia. But, yeah.
And James says, by the way, if anyone has a final question, you have about 30 seconds to get it in. I'll take anyone but Rick Ware. Yeah. If Rick Ware is going to switch to Dodge and have like an alliance with Kaulig, then stipulation number one is Cody Ware gets the hell out of the car. And I don't mean because of the personal stuff. I just mean he's no good. So he's right there with Derek Krause for me.
I don't disagree.
I don't see any other questions, though. So, yeah, Ryan, thanks for doing this tonight, man. 2 hours, 15 minutes. It's super active chat over on YouTube and on X at points. We had, 40-plus people in here at a time. It was a lot of fun, and I'm glad we could go over everything. And one way or another, even if 2027 doesn't happen, there is going to be news on this.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Holden is GM. So.
Holden is GM in Australia. My profile picture is Holden in USA. Gotcha. I'll close with this. I think SVG deserves more credit than he's being given. There was only 4 road courses this year, and I think he only won 2 of them. Didn't sweep like most people thought, and yet he finds himself 13th or 14th in points and
comfortably
50 something on. Yeah, unless he struggles here coming up. We'll see what happens, but SVG deserves a ton of credit, and I'm sure Trackhouse is eager to get him locked down long term because things don't look great for them at the moment. And on the Dodge front, I still think it's more likely it happens than it doesn't. But we'll see. Like I said, you can only push deadlines so far. So we'll see what happens. I mean, they've already pushed deadlines more than 6 months from the rule book. So clearly they are eager to make this happen, and they meaning NASCAR.
Yeah, and listen, the tea leaves are pretty clear that this is something that they're going to make happen. Obviously, things could fall apart, but from what we've heard, what we've talked, who we've talked to, there's a very strong chance this happens, and I think what we've talked about tonight will hopefully point everybody in the direction of where we think this is going to go. But listen, whether, as you said, whether it's 2027 or 2028, this is happening, and I think they will come out and perform and truthfully surprise a lot of people. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, big thank you to everybody who supports the channel. Channel sponsors Lynn over at SVG Nation on Facebook. Our buddy Alex is going through a tough time. We're thinking about you, bro. He's over at Dinger Nation. Ryan returning from vacation. We get arguably our longest stream that isn't a watch party in, with a super active chat. We're going to continue to follow everything. I wouldn't be shocked if things start to quiet down here for a couple of weeks. But hey, we'll see what happens. We will follow it closely. Just big thank you to everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all in order to keep up with each time we do a video. I know we're not doing 3 or 4 videos a week anymore. I'm trying to get out basically 1 video a week and 1 live stream a week. If there's a reason for more, I will do my best to get a quick video out or do a quick live stream. Might not always be the best quality in terms of graphics that come up on screen, because it's hard to find the free time. But we're here, we're committed to this, and thanks for a fun night, everyone.
Thank you very much. It was a great time, guys.
Check us out on X at Ramin is Racing, patreon.com/Ramin is Racing, and we will see each and every one of you on the next episode.